Okay, we're going to read just section 1 on temperature and heat, so this is the first 2 pages. It says, what is temperature? When we measure the temperature of something, we are measuring how hot or cold it is. Temperature is the measure of the average kinetic energy of the particles in an object. The more kinetic energy it has, the hotter it is. All matter is made of atoms or molecules that are always moving, even if it doesn't look like they are. Because the particles are in motion, they have kinetic energy. The faster the particles are moving, the more kinetic energy they have. The more kinetic energy the particles of an object have, the higher the temperature of the object is. Average kinetic energy of particles. Particles of matter are always moving, but they move in different directions and at different speeds. The motion of particles is random. Because particles are moving at different speeds, individual particles have different amounts of kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is the energy of motion. The average kinetic energy of all the particles in an object can be measured. When you measure an object's temperature, you measure the average kinetic energy of all the particles in the object. A thermometer is used to measure the energy of the particles. The temperature of a substance depends on the average kinetic energy of its particles. It does not depend on how much of it you have. Using a thermometer. Thermometers are often used to measure temperature. The liquid inside of it expands when it gets warmer and contracts when it's cooled. Thermometers can measure temperature because of a property called thermal expansion. Thermal expansion is the idea that almost all substances expand when they are heated and contract when they are cooled. Thermal energy is the sum of the kinetic and potential energy of all of the particles in an object. Thermal energy and temperature are similar in that they both reflect the kinetic energy of the particles moving matter. The thermal energy of an object increases as temperature increases. However, temperature reflects the average kinetic energy, whereas thermal energy reflects the total kinetic energy. As a substance temperature increases, its particles move faster and spread out. So, there is more space between them and the substance expands. Mercury and alcohol expand by constant amounts for a given change in temperature. As the liquid in the thermometer increases in temperature, it expands and rises up the thermometer. When the temperature decreases, the liquid cools, it contracts, and lowers in the thermometer. Temperature can be measured using 3 common scales: Celsius, Fahrenheit, and Kelvin. We use the Fahrenheit scale in our daily lives. When a weather report is given, you will probably hear the temperature given in degrees Fahrenheit. Scientists, however, often use the Celsius scale. In the Celsius scale, the temperature range between the freezing point and boiling point of water is divided into 100 equal parts, called degrees Celsius. A third scale, the Kelvin, or absolute scale, is the official SI temperature scale. The Kelvin scale is divided into units called kelvins, not degrees Kelvin. The lowest temperature on the Kelvin scale is 0K, which is called absolute zero. Absolute zero, about negative 459 degrees Fahrenheit, is the temperature at which all molecular motion stops. It is not possible to actually reach absolute zero, although temperatures very close to 0 Kelvin have been reached in laboratories. What is heat? You might think of the word heat as having to do with things that feel hot, but heat also has to do with things that feel cold. In fact, heat is what causes objects to feel hot or cold, or get hot or cold under the right conditions. You probably use the word heat every day to mean different things. Heat is the energy transferred between objects that are at different temperatures. Thermal energy always flows from something at a higher temperature to something at a lower temperature. When two objects at different temperatures come into contact, energy is always transferred from the object that has the higher temperature to the object that has the lower temperature. Heat and thermal energy. If heat is transferred energy, what form of energy is being transferred? The answer is thermal energy. Thermal energy is the total kinetic energy of the particles that make up a substance. Thermal energy, which is measured in joules, depends partly on temperature. Something at a high temperature has more thermal energy than it would have at a lower temperature. Energy from heat is composed of vibrating particles. The more they vibrate, the hotter a material becomes. Thermal energy also depends on how much of a substance there is. The more particles there are in a substance at a given temperature, the greater the thermal energy of the substance is. For example, a pan of hot soup will have more thermal energy than a bowl of hot soup. Although both soups are at the same temperature, there is more soup in the pan. So the soup in the pan has more thermal energy than the soup in the bowl.